Imagine spending a fortune so vast that it nearly bankrupts an entire kingdom. Imagine building fairy tale castles while your government falls into chaos. And imagine being declared insane by your own ministers without ever being examined by a doctor. This is the story of Ludwig II of Bavaria, a king remembered as a dreamer, a genius, a madman, and a mystery. Some saw him as a visionary who transformed Bavaria into a land of fantasy. Others believed he was dangerously detached from reality, wasting public money while his kingdom struggled. His life ended under mysterious circumstances beside a dark lake. And more than a century later, people are still asking the same question. Was Ludwig II truly mad, or was he simply a king born in the wrong era? To understand the truth, we need to travel back to 19th century Bavaria. Ludwig Otto Friedrich Wilhelm was born on August 25, 1845, into the royal family of Bavaria. From a young age, he was different. Unlike many princes who enjoyed military training and political discussions, Ludwig preferred stories, legends, music, and fantasy. He spent hours lost in tales of knights, heroic quests, and mythical kingdoms. These childhood passions would shape the rest of his life. When Ludwig was only 18 years old, tragedy struck. His father died unexpectedly, and the young prince suddenly became King Ludwig II of Bavaria. The people were fascinated by their new monarch. Tall, handsome, and charismatic, Ludwig looked every bit like a fairy tale king. Crowds admired him instantly. But behind the royal image was a young man completely unprepared for the brutal realities of politics. Europe during this period was changing rapidly. Powerful states were competing for influence, and Bavaria found itself caught between larger forces. One of the most important figures of the era was Otto von Bismarck, the mastermind behind the unification of Germany. As tensions grew, Ludwig struggled to navigate the political storm. In 1866, Bavaria fought alongside Austria against Prussia. The war ended in disaster. Prussia emerged victorious, and Bavaria's influence declined significantly. Ludwig hated politics, negotiations, and military affairs. Instead of focusing on government, he increasingly retreated into his private world. There was one thing that fascinated him more than anything else: art. In particular, Ludwig became obsessed with the composer Richard Wagner. Wagner's operas were filled with heroes, gods, castles, and legends. To Ludwig, they represented everything he loved. The young king became Wagner's patron, providing enormous financial support to the struggling composer. Many politicians were furious. They believed Ludwig was wasting money on artistic fantasies while ignoring the needs of the kingdom. Yet Ludwig didn't care. He believed beauty and culture were just as important as power and politics. As the years passed, Ludwig became increasingly isolated. He preferred solitude over court life. He often slept during the day and stayed awake throughout the night. He avoided public appearances and spent long periods away from government officials. Rumors began spreading throughout Bavaria. Some people believed their king was eccentric. Others thought he was losing touch with reality. Then came the project that would define his legacy forever. Ludwig dreamed of creating his own fantasy world. He wanted castles that looked as though they had come directly from legends and fairy tales. His most famous creation was Neuschwanstein Castle. Perched high on a rugged hill, the castle looked almost unreal. With towering spires, grand halls, and breathtaking views, it appeared more like a dream than a residence. Construction costs were enormous, and Neuschwanstein was only the beginning. Ludwig ordered the construction of several extravagant palaces and castles. Each was more ambitious than the last. He spared no expense. Rare materials, elaborate decorations, and complex engineering projects consumed vast amounts of money. The king borrowed heavily to finance his vision. By the 1880s, Bavaria's financial situation was becoming alarming. Government officials warned that Ludwig's spending was out of control. Debts continued to rise. Ministers feared that the kingdom could face serious economic consequences. But Ludwig refused to stop. To him, these castles were not luxuries. They were works of art. They were monuments to beauty in an increasingly industrial and political world. The conflict between Ludwig and his government reached a breaking point. His ministers concluded that the only way to save the kingdom was to remove him from power. But there was a problem.
A king could not simply be dismissed. There needed to be a reason. That reason became insanity. In 1886, a group of doctors prepared a report declaring Ludwig mentally unfit to rule. The shocking part was that several of the doctors had never personally examined him. The report relied largely on witness statements, rumors, and accounts of his unusual behavior. Soon afterward, Ludwig was officially declared insane. His uncle was appointed as regent, effectively taking control of Bavaria. The king was arrested and taken to Berg Castle near Lake Starnberg. Ludwig was furious. He insisted that he had been betrayed. Supporters argued that he was perfectly sane and had become the victim of a political conspiracy. The stage was set for one of history's greatest royal mysteries. On June 13th, 1886, Ludwig went for an evening walk near Lake Starnberg with his psychiatrist, Dr. Bernhard von Gudden. The two men never returned. Hours later, search parties discovered both bodies in the lake. The official explanation stated that Ludwig had attempted suicide and that the doctor died while trying to stop him. But almost immediately, doubts emerged. Ludwig was reportedly a strong swimmer. Some witnesses questioned whether he would have drowned in relatively shallow water. Others suspected foul play. Conspiracy theories spread rapidly. Was Ludwig murdered? Did he attempt to escape? Was there a struggle that ended in tragedy? More than a century later, no one knows for certain. The mystery remains unsolved. Ironically, the king who was accused of ruining Bavaria ultimately became one of its greatest assets. Today, millions of tourists visit the castles he built. Neuschwanstein alone attracts visitors from around the world.